Once upon a time. The struggling hunter. The village of Mokono was known far and wide for its great hunters. Men who could bring down the largest game were honored, given respect, and granted the right to marry the heaviest woman in the village, a tradition that symbolized strength and prosperity. But for Jabari, life in Mokono was not easy. Jabari was a young hunter, often at a young age, and forced to learn the ways of the wild on his own. Unlike the other men in the village, who returned from their hunts carrying antelope, boars, and even buffalo, Jabari struggled to catch anything larger than a rabbit or a wild bird. The villagers had given him a cruel nickname, Tiny Hunter. Look at him, they would laugh, pointing at his meager catch. He's better suited for catching rats than hunting real game. Among those who mocked him the most were Akon and Mob, the two most successful hunters in the village. They came from wealthy families, had the best weapons, and often boasted about their strength. Jabari, Mob sneered one afternoon, leaning against his massive spear, "You should give up hunting and start gathering firewood instead. Maybe then, someone will actually find you useful." The other men laughed, slapping their knees in amusement. Jabari clenched his fist but said nothing. He had learned long ago that arguing with men like Akon and Mob was pointless. But not everyone in the village looked down on him. Old Man Keto, the village elder, had always been kind to Jabari. He was a man of great wisdom, known for advising the chief himself. Whenever Jabari felt discouraged, he would visit Keto's hut and listen to his stories. "Strength is not in the size of your prey, my son," Keto often told him. "Strength is in the heart of the hunter. Patience, kindness, and wisdom, these are the greatest weapons of all." Jabari wanted to believe him. But in Mokono, a man was judged by the size of his hunt. The village festival and humiliation. The time came for the annual village festival, a grand event filled with music, dance, and feasting. It was also a chance for young men to impress the women of the village. Jabari had always admired Nyasha, the daughter of a wealthy merchant. She was beautiful, graceful, and intelligent. Unlike the daughters of hunters, Nyasha had plenty of food to eat, making her one of the heaviest women in the village, a prized match. Summoning all his courage, Jabari approached her while she stood with her friends. "Nyasha," he said, his voice steady but nervous, I would like to talk to you." Nyasha turned, looked him up and down, and then burst into laughter. "Talk to me." "You," she giggled, covering her mouth. "What could a tiny hunter like you possibly offer me?" Her friends joined in the laughter. Jabari felt his heart sink. "I may not be the best hunter," he said quietly, "but I—" "Oh, please," Nyasha interrupted, rolling her eyes. "Even if I were starving, I wouldn't eat the tiny birds you bring home. A real woman deserves a real hunter." The crowd around them erupted in laughter, and Jabari felt the sting of humiliation deep in his chest. Akon, standing nearby, grinned. "See, tiny hunter. Even the women know you're not a real man." Jabari turned and walked away, his face burning with shame. That night, as he sat alone by his small hut, staring at the stars, he made a silent promise to himself. "I will prove them wrong. I will find a way to change my fate." No matter what it took, Jabari would become a hunter worthy of respect, the outcast woman. The sun had begun its slow descent over Mokono, painting the sky in hues of orange and gold. Jabari moved quietly through the tall grass, his spear gripped firmly in his hand. He was hunting again, though his luck had not changed. He had tracked a small antelope for hours, only for it to escape just as he was ready to strike. With a sigh, he made his way toward the river, hoping to clear his mind before heading back to the village. But as he approached the water's edge, he heard something strange. Crying. Jabari froze. It was a woman's voice, soft yet filled with deep sorrow. He followed the sound, stepping carefully over the smooth stones near the riverbank. And then, he saw her. A woman sat on a rock, her face buried in her hands, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. She was the largest woman Jabari had ever seen, her frame strong yet worn by hardship. Her clothes were tattered and dusty, as if she had traveled a long distance. For a moment, Jabari simply watched. Who was she? He had never seen her before. Finally, he stepped forward. Are you hurt? He asked gently. The woman gasped and looked up, her teary eyes wide with surprise. She had not expected anyone to find her here. She hesitated, wiping her face. I'm not hurt. Just lost. Jabari frowned. You're not from Mokono, are you? She shook her head. No. My name is Zubri. I come from a village far away. Jabari sat down on a nearby rock. Why are you crying? Zubri looked away, her fingers clutching her torn shawl. Because no one wants me, she whispered. My people said I was too big, too different. They laughed at me, treated me like I was nothing. They told me, no man would ever want a wife like me. Jabari's chest tightened. He knew the pain of being mocked, of being told he was not enough. But he also knew that pain did not define a person. A person's worth is not measured by their weight, he said softly. But by their heart. Zubri's eyes widened. She stared at Jabari, as if trying to understand his words. You don't think I'm worthless? She asked, her voice trembling. Jabari smiled. Of course not. You are strong. You survived when others tried to break you. That means you have more worth than they will ever see. Zubri looked down, blinking back fresh tears. No one had ever spoken to her like that before. For a long time, neither of them spoke. The river flowed gently beside them, the wind whispering through the trees. Then, Jabari reached into his pouch and pulled out a small fruit, placing it in Zubri's hand. Here, he said. Eat. You are welcome in Mokono. Zubri stared at the fruit, then at him. Slowly, she smiled, the small, uncertain smile, but one filled with something she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. At that moment, something unspoken passed between them, a bond, fragile but real. Jabari had always been alone, and so had Zubri. But maybe, just maybe, they had found something more than friendship in the quiet of the evening, beneath the setting sun, the village's judgment. By morning, the news had spread like wildfire. The villagers whispered as they gathered at the marketplace, pointing and laughing whenever Jabari walked by. Did you hear? A woman said to her friend. Jabari, the tiny hunter, has found himself a wife. Not just any wife, the friend giggled. An outcast. A woman so large, her own people sent her away. The laughter rang through the village. Jabari knew they were talking about him. He didn't care. He walked proudly beside Zubri, his head held high. He had nothing to be ashamed of. But Zubri felt the weight of their stares. She had spent her life being mocked for her size, and though she had thought Mokono would be different, it was all happening again. That morning, as they walked past the village well, Akon and Mo blocked their path. Akon smirked, folding his arms. Is this the best you can do, Jabari? No real woman will have you, so you choose an outcast. Mob laughed. Maybe he hopes she'll sit on his enemies and crush them. It's the only way Jabari will ever win a fight. The villagers burst into laughter. Jabari stared at them, unshaken. Zubri is more woman than either of you deserve, he said, his voice calm but firm. Akon's smirk disappeared. Watch your tongue, tiny hunter. But Jabari refused to back down. She is strong. She is kind. And unlike you, she does not need to belittle others to prove her worth. For the first time, the laughter faded. Jabari took Zubri's hand and walked past them, ignoring their insults. But Zubri's heart was heavy. That night, she sat outside Jabari's hut, staring at the sky. "Maybe I should leave," she whispered. "I don't belong here." Jabari knelt beside her. "You belong wherever you choose to be, Zubri. You are not an outcast. Not to me." She looked at him, searching his face for any sign of doubt. But all she saw was honesty. Before she could answer, the village drum sounded in the distance. A voice echoed across Mokono. "Tomorrow, the chief will make an important announcement. All villagers must gather in the square." Jabari and Zubri exchanged glances. What was happening? The marriage contest. The next morning, the entire village gathered in the square, eager to hear the chief's words. The village chief, a tall man with grey-streaked hair, stepped forward, his staff tapping against the ground. "The time has come for the annual marriage contest," he declared. "As tradition states, the heaviest woman in Mokono shall be chosen as the bride. And only the hunter who proves his worth may marry her." The crowd murmured with excitement. Akon and Mob grinned, confident that one of them would win. The chief continued. "This year, there is a new addition to our village. A woman who, by our laws, qualifies for the contest." The villagers turned their heads, and then gasped. The chief raised his hand toward Zubri. "She is the heaviest woman in Mokono," he declared. "If she chooses to stay, she will be the prize of the contest." A stunned silence fell over the crowd. Akon and Mob's grins vanished. Zubri's heart pounded in her chest. She never wanted to be a prize. She never wanted to be fought over like a trophy. She looked at Jabari, her eyes filled with fear and uncertainty. But Jabari saw something else, an opportunity. A chance to prove his worth. A chance to change both their fates forever, the great hunting test. The air in Mokono was filled with excitement. The marriage contest had begun. At sunrise, the village chief stood before the hunters, his voice carrying across the square. To prove their worth, the hunters must enter the great forest, he declared. Whoever brings back the greatest hunt shall win Zubri's hand in marriage. The villagers cheered, eager to see a grand competition. Akon and Mob smirked, exchanging knowing glances. This was their chance to crush Jabari once and for all. "Let's make this interesting," Akon sneered, stepping toward Jabari. "If you return empty-handed, you must leave the village forever." The crowd laughed at the challenge, expecting Jabari to back down. But Jabari's eyes remained steady. He had no intention of losing. "Then I suggest you hunt wisely," Jabari replied, gripping his spear. The hunters set off into the forest, their spirits high, their minds set on victory. The hunt begins. As soon as they reached the deep forest, Akon and Mob split from the others, whispering among themselves. "We need to find the biggest prey," Mob said. "Something Jabari could never dream of hunting." Akon nodded. "A buffalo. It's the largest animal in the area. If we bring one back, there's no way we can lose." The two men moved quickly, tracking the powerful beast. Meanwhile, Jabari walked alone, his mind clear, his steps careful. He wasn't looking for the biggest prey. Instead, he was listening to the signs of nature, just as Old Man Keto had taught him. "The forest speaks if you listen," Keto had once told him. The greatest hunters don't chase blindly, they understand the land. Jabari followed the subtle clues, the rustling of leaves, the footprints in the soil, the disturbed patches of grass. Then, he saw it. A lion. The dangerous choice. The great beast lay in the shade of a tree, its breathing heavy, its leg wounded. Jabari's heart pounded. Lions were sacred in Mokono. They were rare, powerful, and the ultimate test of a hunter's skill. He had two choices. Find an easier prey, like the others, and return with something safe. risk everything and bring back the most dangerous catch of all. He gripped his spear tighter. He had been underestimated his entire life. He would not let this chance slip away. Jabari moved slowly, using the shadows to mask his approach. He studied the lion's movements, its weakened state, the way its body tensed. He knew he couldn't defeat it with strength alone. He needed strategy. The clever trap. Jabari dug quickly, setting up a hidden trap near the base of a tree. He then moved to the opposite side, making a loud noise to startle the lion. The great beast rose, roaring, and leaped toward him, right into the hidden snare. The trap closed around its leg, holding it in place. The forest fell silent. Jabari stood before the captured lion, sweat dripping down his face. He had done it. But he did not kill the lion. Instead, he tied a rope around it, keeping it alive. He knew that bringing a living lion back to the village would be an even greater feat. The triumphant return. Hours later, the villagers gathered at the square, eager to see the result of the hunt. Akon and Mob came first, dragging a massive buffalo behind them. The crowd cheered at the sight of the beast. "There is no greater catch than this," Akon shouted, raising his arms. Mob smirked, looking around. "Where is Jabari? Did he run away in shame?" The villagers laughed, already assuming his defeat. Then, a loud gasp spread through the crowd. Jabari walked into the village, leading a bound, living lion behind him. The beast growled, its golden eyes flashing in the sunlight. The entire village fell silent. Even the chief's eyes widened in shock. Jabari stopped in front of the village elders, standing tall. "I have returned," he said, his voice calm and firm. The entire village erupted in stunned cheers. Jabari had done the impossible, betrayal and truth. The village of Mokono was still buzzing with shock and excitement. No one had ever seen such a hunt before. Jabari, the tiny hunter, had returned with a living lion. The elders gathered, whispering among themselves. The marriage contest had been won, but tradition required the chief's final approval. Jabari stood before them, his head held high, while Zuburi watched from the crowd. But not everyone was pleased. The lies of Akon and Mob. Akon and Mob, humiliated by their defeat, stood in the shadows, their faces twisted with anger. "He made us look like fools," Akon hissed. "If we don't act now, he will take everything from us." Mob smacked. "Then let's make the village doubt him." They stepped forward, raising their voices for all to hear. "This is a lie," Akon shouted, pointing at Jabari. "He did not hunt that lion himself." The crowd gasped. Mob continued, "We heard rumors of another hunter, a stranger from a distant land, who was tracking a wounded lion. Jabari must have stolen his kill and brought it here as his own." Jabari's eyes narrowed. "That's not true," he said firmly. But the seeds of doubt had already been planted. The chief hesitated, studying Jabari carefully. "Do you have proof of your hunt?" the chief asked. Jabari remained silent. He had no witnesses, only his word. The villagers murmured among themselves. A trial by strength. Akon stepped forward with a cruel smile. "If he truly is the greatest hunter, let him prove it. Let there be a final test, a trial by strength." The crowd cheered, eager for more entertainment. Jabari, however, remained calm. "A hunter's true strength is in wisdom, not fist," he said, his voice steady. The villagers fell silent. No man had ever refused a trial by strength before. Mob scoffed. "So you're a coward after all." Jabari's eyes burned with quiet determination. "No, Mob. I simply know that the greatest hunts are won with patience, not rage." For the first time, Akon and Mob had no response. Zubri speaks. Before anyone could say another word, Zubri stepped forward. Her voice was strong, filled with passion and certainty. Enough, she said. I have listened to your gossip and lies for too long. The village turned to her in surprise. I have seen how you treat Jabari, Zubri continued. You laugh at him, mock him, and call him weak. But tell me, which of you had the courage to stand by me? The villagers were silent. Jabari is the only man in this village who values me for who I am, Zubri declared. Her words shook the crowd. The chief's eyes flickered with understanding. He had ruled for many years, and he could see the truth in her words. Slowly, he turned to Jabari. I believe you, he said. The crowd murmured. Punishment and victory. Akon and Mob tried to argue, but the chief raised his hand, silencing them. You have spoken lies to dishonor a hunter, the chief said sternly. For that, you shall be punished. As their punishment, Akon and Mob were ordered to serve the village for a full year, hunting and providing food, but never claiming glory. The villagers whispered in shock. For the first time, Akon and Mob looked truly defeated. Jabari and Zubri had won the contest, and yet Zubri's heart was still unsure. As the celebration began, she pulled Jabari aside. Are you sure about this? She whispered. The whole village is watching now. If we marry, you will always be known as the man who chose the outcast. Jabari smiled gently. You were never an outcast to me, he said. Zubri's heart pounded, but a part of her still hesitated. Something was left unsaid. Something she had not yet revealed. The unexpected queen. The sun hung low over Mokono, casting long shadows across the village square. The contest had ended, and Jabari stood victorious. But despite the cheers, the villagers still whispered among themselves. Will she really marry him? One elder murmured. She must be ashamed, another said. A woman like her, married to the poorest hunter. Even now, some doubted. Some still clung to their old beliefs, that status, strength, and wealth mattered more than character. All eyes turned to Zubri. Would she reject Jabari? Would she flee in shame? Zubri stepped forward, her face unreadable. She turned to Jabari, studying him carefully. Then, she turned to the village chief. And she spoke words that shook the entire village. Zubri's secret. I am not an outcast, Zubri said, her voice steady. A ripple of shock ran through the crowd. I was not banished from my village, she continued. I left by choice. Gasps filled the air. Even Jabari's eyes widened in surprise. My true name, Zubri said, lifting her chin, is Princess Zubri of the Mountain Kingdom. The crowd fell silent. Akon and Mob, still kneeling in punishment, gaped in disbelief. The chief's face paled. I was sent away, Zubri explained, because my people believed that a woman of my size could never be loved. They believed no man would see me for anything more than my weight. Tears glistened in her eyes, but her voice was strong. I refused to accept that fate. I left my home to find a man who would love me for my heart, not my status, not my wealth, and not for the title of princess. She turned to Jabari, smiling softly. And I found him. The village is stunned. The villagers stood frozen in disbelief. A princess. Here. Had they spent all this time mocking royalty? The chief lowered his head. I was blind, he admitted, his voice filled with regret. Our traditions have led us to judge men by their haunts and women by their size. But today, we have seen the truth. He looked at Jabari, respect shining in his eyes. A true hunter is not measured by his skill, but by his heart, the chief said. And a true woman is not defined by her weight, but by her worth. The grand wedding. That evening, Mokono transformed. Torches burned brightly, drums thundered, and the scent of roasted meat filled the air. The biggest wedding in the village's history was about to take place. Zubri and Jabari stood before the chief, their hands intertwined. "You have taught us a great lesson," the chief said. "And so, as my final act as ruler, I name you, Jabari, the new chief of Mokono." The village roared with applause. Even Akon and Mob, humbled by their punishment, bowed their heads. Jabari looked at Zubri, his heart full. "We built something stronger than traditions today," he whispered to her. "We built something that will last." Zubri smiled. Together, a new era begins. Under Jabari and Zubri's rule, Mokono changed forever. Hunters were no longer judged by the size of their prey, but by their wisdom and kindness. Women were no longer valued for their weight, but for their strength, intelligence, and character. Akon and Mob, now humbled, served the village, helping build homes and hunt for food, not for glory, but for the good of the people. And so, Mokono flourished. Because in the end, the strongest men are not those with the biggest prey, but those who see the true worth in others. The end.